Welcome, everyone. I'm here with Stephanie Menji. She is an art business mentor. Welcome, Stephanie.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Thank you so much. So you're based in Miami?
Yep. MIA 305.
So what would you say is an art business mentor?
So basically an art business mentor, I kind of self-proclaimed my title because when I started this business, I wanted to go ahead and do marketing consultant. And I was going to go ahead and help galleries and I wanted to help just make the art world better. But then over time, that transitioned into me helping artists and helping them sell their work and help them promote themselves and teaching them a lot of the things that I had learned in my marketing experience. And I thought, well, marketing consultant, that's kind of one-sided to what I do, because a lot of the things that I teach artists revolve around teaching them how to be very confident, teaching them how to look within themselves and understand why they need to do certain things. So just thinking about when I was in school, I thought I never had a mentor. I never had anybody really teach me how to do things or tell me what would be best. So I thought, well, if I could be that mentor for artists, that would be just the ultimate dream. So that's why I'm an art business mentor, because I want to go ahead and help artists learn not only about business and marketing, but help them find a new side of themselves so they can be more confident in what they do.
That's so true. What would you say is like the number one thing that you find holding artists back?
Well, from my experience, it's definitely the confidence. A lot of the time, you know, we're very self-deprecating. We tend to tell ourselves like, oh, well, this isn't good enough, or we're too much of a perfectionist, or we'll be like, oh, this isn't perfect, I can't show the world this. And that combined with what people are saying about artists, a lot of the time, you know, that stigma of the starving artist is still floating around. If you tell somebody that you're an artist, they kind of look at you weird, and it's like, so what do you do? Or like, do you have a job? Or like, do you make a living? And all of those things, I think they just pile onto us as creatives. And sometimes we take them very seriously. And I feel like that's what stops us from looking outside ourselves and saying like, oh, this is, despite what everybody's saying, I can do this. And there's many ways for me to make money, or many ways for me to influence people with my artwork. So I think confidence is the main thing. And just being able to look within ourselves and look past all those things.
Do you have any strategies or resources that you would use to gain that confidence as an artist?
Oh yeah. So if you don't mind, I'll tell you a story of how my confidence was down in the dumps when I first started this business, actually. So way back when I decided to go into art, I was going through a career crisis. I was studying pre-med biology, and I was always very artistic. I had won art competitions. I had done work in art museums, and then I decided to switch. And just imagine coming from a Hispanic family, how they took it. I was going to be a doctor, and all of a sudden it's like, no, I'm dropping everything to be an artist. Of course, they were like, well, how are you going to make money? Well, that's not a very respected career, you know, all like the negative things. But I kind of brushed it off. Later on, my career changed and I found a position in marketing. And there, you know, it was like, I was this artsy creative girl starting completely new, learning this new subject. And I always felt like I had to prove somebody. So it's like, I had never conquered my own personal demons when it came to being an artist. And then I was learning something new that I didn't understand. And by mid-career in my marketing job, I just felt like terrible. I was getting very anxious. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't feel fulfilled. It was just a mess. And I just didn't feel like myself. So I stumbled upon this app called Blinkist, and it's like basically like Sparks Notes, where they like give you like 15-minute summaries of little books. And I found this book called The Confidence Gap. And I started listening to the review, and then the guy's like talking about how like everything revolves around your mind, and that you're basically telling yourself negative things, and that's what brings down your confidence. And I was like, oh snap, I'm like messed up. I I don't understand myself. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I like. And that was like my turning point. Like, you have to work on yourself. So to answer your question, I really suggest any artist to go ahead and try to learn a little bit more about psychology. I highly recommend that book, The Confidence Gap, to kind of understand what does it mean to be confident, what does it mean to have trust in yourself, and kind of work your way up from there.
I feel personally triggered. I think one of the most toxic things that I walked away from art school with was this idea of comparing myself to others and constantly feeling like what I was doing wasn't good enough. And it's taken me years to unlearn that, and I'm still working to unlearn that. And
For sure.
powerful. What would tell me a little bit about, were you always interested in art? And then tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Oh, yeah, it's I think it's been in my life since I was a kid. My dad was a graphic artist and my mom is a nurse, which is totally weird. But so with the graphic artist side, he always pushed me. My dad always pushed me to like just be creative. He used to work at it was kind of like an advertising graphic design agency, and he always used to bring like scrap paper from the company that had like the printouts of like the ads and stuff, and then he would just give it to me and I would go ahead and draw on it and then watch Bob Ross with my grandma. But then during that same time, my mom had me very young, so she was in college to become a nurse, and a lot of her assignments when it came to taking like art appreciation and those general ed creds revolved around them taking me to museums with them. So it's like I kind of got indoctrinated into the art world without really knowing. But I think the big turning point for me, knowing that I wanted or I was interested in art, was when I was 15. And in high school, I decided to take a graphic design class. And at the same time, I started doing community service at an art museum. And in that art museum, I started learning about what contemporary art is. And that's when everything kind of came together. And I was like, oh, snap, like you can make millions of dollars off art that just doesn't look like art. And that's basically that's the beginning, and it's continued since then.
Tell me the moment where it crystallized for you, where you were like, art is going to be my career, and that courage that took to make that leap.
Oh my God. that was I want to say it was probably the second year of college. I had gone ahead and left my first year to try to pursue pre-med, and then the university I went to was private, so it was really expensive, and I came back and I was taking like calculus and I was taking physics and all these classes, which I like the subject, but the way those classes are taught, they're all about memorization. They're all about, read 10 chapters in a book and then go ahead and take a test. And, if you're creative, that just doesn't fly. So I just started vandalizing the desks in my physics classes. Like I was drawing on the desk and doing these like things you shouldn't be doing in the classes. And my boyfriend, I've been with him since high school. He's like telling me, he's like, if you want to do art, like that's your calling. That's what you're into. You've always liked it. And I was like, I don't know, but I want to be a doctor. And it was like this whole existential crisis that I had. I would like cry at night until one day I was just like, well, this isn't making me happy. I'm just going to take the leap because, who else is going to live my life besides me? So I just went one day and I went to different majors. I actually considered many different majors before going into art. And I took like a business paper and an environmental science paper. And I was like, I was still like going through a crisis until I went to see an advisor and I asked them like, should I go into art or should I go into continue my pre-med studies? And they were like, one of them told me, she was like, well, I think you just have to pray on it. I was like, this isn't helping me at all, ma'am. And then I went to go see one of the professors in the art school on the art major category of the university. And then he was like, do whatever makes you happy. And I don't know, that just felt so calming, so reassuring. And that's when I took the leap. So I decided to become an art photography major.
So I have a couple questions there, but I have just a quick story. So my mentor in college, he was the head of the graduate program, and he always told me that the role of college, specifically art school, was to give you that existential crisis. And what separates a good school from a great school is that great school will give you two crises.
Well, I think that they succeeded.
But I think so many people think the shifting moments stay with you forever. Um, so why photography, and then tell me a little bit about like the kind of art that you were making, and then the leap from being an artist to helping artists.
Okay, so the reason I chose photography is because, like I mentioned, in high school, I ended up doing graphic design. And throughout the 4 years, I had learned pretty well how to do graphic design. And I thought, well, FIU, I went to Florida International University, and there it's like, well, I don't want to be a graphic design like my dad. And I didn't want to go into painting because I wanted some kind of complementary skills that would match the graphic design skills that I already have. So I was like, well, photography is pretty practical, and I think I'm pretty good at taking pictures. So I went ahead and I went and learned the art side of photography, along with, I did a minor in art history too. And that's why I kind of chose photography. As far as doing the switch from making art to going ahead and helping artists, that all happened after I went into marketing. So when I was working in marketing, I had the ability to work. It was a textile company. Let me go back. It was a textile company that helped artists license their artwork on fabric. So I was working one-on-one with all those artists. I would tell them how we were going to promote their fabrics, what were going to be the big campaigns. And then at one point, my boss was like, there's this guy that I've been watching him, and I want him to be our influencer. And I was like, okay. So she shows me his stuff. And at the beginning, I was like, oh, well, I don't know if he could be an influencer. He was like starting out, but she saw some kind of potential in him. So then she's like, I want you to bring him in. I didn't know what I was doing. So then I started talking to him. I basically become friends with him. And I kind of started like...
Up to him? Were you reaching out to him over Instagram, over email?
Yeah, we reached out to him on Instagram. And he was doing like sewing projects with different fabrics. But she saw some kind of potential, and she knew that he would be a very good asset as an influencer. And she thought that we could like kind of like build him up to be like the face of the company in a way. So at that point, I started like conversations with him, and I basically become friends with him, and I start pushing certain things like, hey, if you do this a certain way, I bet you're gonna get more followers. Or if you design this in a specific way or take a picture like this, I think people are gonna like it more. And that's kind of where like my love for like truly like working one-on-one with another artist kind of started. So then from there, he became our big influencer. And at that point, I was also thinking like, well, I'm not really happy at this job. I kind of want to transition into something else. So one day I got an entrepreneurial seizure, which is a term from this book called The E-Myth. Highly recommend it. And and I was like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm tired of this. I'm going to go start a business. And of course, in between, I had a few crises. And I was able to invest in a really good course. And from there, I was like, okay, this is what I truly want. I want to go ahead and I want to help as many artists as possible, because that's something that I didn't have. I didn't have that person whispering in my ear telling me what to do. I had no idea how to sell my work when I was in college. And everything that just happened to me was by like me just asking questions and kind of pushing my way in certain directions by surprise. So I think I just didn't want other artists to struggle as much as I did and be as confused. And that's why I chose to go ahead and teach artists everything that I know.
Why do you think art school doesn't teach those things?
Well, I think it's because they're still teaching the old school way of doing art. So they're more focused on ideas. They want you to be very good at your craft, and they want you to go ahead and be the best at that as possible. But many of the people in the art world, they're not business people. They don't understand how marketing works, or they don't understand what it takes to find an audience or anything like that. So it's like there's a big disconnect. Maybe if art schools or maybe even art departments did some classes that are merged together with like the business schools or with like the marketing departments, or just invited artists that were making a living, artists would be more inspired to go ahead and do that. But since we're so focused on just make art and then wait for somebody to give you a chance, that's probably why. It's just kind of an old way of thinking, I guess.
So then what advice would you give to someone who has a degree in art, they're making art for years consistently, they want to make that leap to a full-time artist?
I would say don't be afraid of learning new subjects and looking into other industries to see how they're working. I like to look at other industries that are complementary to art, or that are still creative but still have very big commerce sides. So for example, when I wasn't sure what I was doing in art, I would always look at the fashion industry, because the fashion industry, they're very creative, but they're still very innovative when it comes to business. So my best advice is to always look at other industries, see what they're doing, and try to adapt certain things to your own practice, because that's the only way that you can learn. If you stay stuck in this artistic bubble, you're going to think that that's how the world is, and it's going to be very hard to kind of progress outward.
And that's so true, because also there's not just one artistic bubble too. There's like,
Yeah.
That's such a good point, because I'm really tapped into the fashion world. You'd never look at it by how I dress. But I've been a fashion photographer for years, and that's actually why I moved to Miami. But I moved here because I got signed with an agency here. That's why I wound up in Miami, because I was going to be a fashion photographer with an agency here, and then I'm still repped with them, but it doesn't count. I guess they just don't send me any jobs. I was seeing so many amazing campaigns by big brands using work on their cell phones, like recording stuff on their iPhones, and just like, because it feels more intimate, it feels more authentic. And that was one of the things that made the leap for my business was, if X and Y luxury brand can do selfies with their phone and be taken seriously, so can I.
Exactly. So like, just to piggyback on your story, when I was working in marketing, again, I was this artsy girl that had no idea what I was doing. And the company I was working for was tailored towards the quilting industry. Mm-hmm. I don't know about you, but I've never made a quilt in my life until
I come from Amishland, Pennsylvania, the quilt capital of the world.
Well, you probably would have been more experienced than me, but at the time...
I sleep on handmade quilts from...
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Now that's a small world.
Okay, continue.
So no, but yeah, so like when I was trying to figure out all this marketing stuff out at the beginning, what I would do is I would just look at other campaigns. I just started collecting a bunch of magazines, a bunch of fashion magazines, and I started looking at, again, different industries. I had come from working at Apple, so I was like, what was Apple doing at the time that I could somehow apply to the quilting industry and our audience would have liked it? Or what is Vogue doing that we can kind of strip down, and people in the Midwest that were buying our fabrics would go ahead and do that. So and to this day I still do that, even with my own business. So
that's so amazing. What advice would you give to someone who, it's so good that you have that archive, but what advice would you have to someone who wants to learn a little bit more about marketing? And like how would you even define marketing?
Well, in the simplest terms, marketing is the way that you attract people to you, the way that you attract customers to you, which is very different from branding. A lot of people think that branding and marketing are the same thing, but they're not. Branding is the way that people feel about you and how they perceive you. So when it comes to learning about marketing, basically what I did was start learning the fundamentals and start learning from the best people in the industry. I think one of the first books that I read were the 22 Immutable Laws of Marketing. And it's a super small book. It's like probably like 100 pages. And that'll give you like the biggest crash course into marketing that you could ever have. And then from there, once you really start understanding those concepts on a very like simple level, you'll get more curious and you'll start like Googling like, okay, what's another book that I can check out? Or who are some really big people? One marketer that I love and I follow him like crazy. His name is Russell Brunson. He makes marketing very simple, and he's a very like personable guy. He talks in a lot of stories. And I think regardless of you being in art or any other industry, you can learn a lot from him. So one, learn from a lot of old school marketing books, and two, find the industry leaders in that field and learn from them and see how you can apply that to the arts.
One final question around this thing. Let's say, a large part of my audience, let's say that I am a painter. I have 300 followers on Instagram. I'm posting paintings 4 times a week on my Instagram. What advice would you give if I could do one thing that would like transform what it is that I'm doing? What should I do?
Well, if you haven't done it yet and you are selling your work on a website, you have to tell people what to do. That is the biggest thing probably that I teach all the artists that I work with, is that you have to tell them what to do. Because just because you post a picture on Instagram, it doesn't mean that people know that you're selling things. So once in a while, if it's a piece that you've had in your studio for a while, you want to tell them, click the link in bio to check out my website, or click the link in bio if you want to buy it. Or basically always have that call to action, which is telling people what to do, because if not, people are just going to look at it and they'll be like, well, okay, moving on. Remember, people's attention span right now is like a goldfish. So
do you have any advice for people? This is a selfish question. So I make like installation and performance art, stuff that when I was at art school, I was like, I don't even care if I sell it. Do you have any advice for selling work that isn't going to hang on a wall very easily?
Well, I think it depends on the installation art. Like, give me a scenario so I could give you a better answer.
Say something like a James Turrell.
Okay.
Or like a Carl Andre. I think.
Well, think about it. If you don't want to sell it, but you still want to tell people what to do so they can experience whatever you've created within that installation. Let's say maybe you can go ahead and create a video, but you don't want to post that whole video on Instagram. You kind of just want to tease them. So you share the picture, let's say, of your James Turrell inspired installation, and tell them, hey, check out the full video where you can see this installation doing crazy effects or whatever it does, by clicking the link in bio to see the full video. Or again, telling somebody what to do doesn't necessarily have to be directing them out of your Instagram. You can tell them, comment a yellow heart in the comments if you love this artwork and you would want to see more. Basically, it's a way for fishing for people's reactions. So that's why you always kind of want to encourage that kind of engagement, even if you're not selling the work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. If you're an artist and you are wanting to make a living from your art, should you be thinking about how you're going to sell it while you're making it?
I wouldn't say while you're making it, because that can probably fog up whatever ideas you're trying to express during the creation process. But I would probably plan that either beforehand or afterwards. So if you're going to go for the before technique, let's say you have a rough idea of creating a series about flowers, let's say, right? So beforehand, you want to think about, okay, I'm going to create 5 pieces about flowers. I want to price them between $500 and $1,000. And when they're all done, this is how I'm going to go ahead and promote them. So let's say I'm going to go ahead and do videos close-up videos of me talking about the work, and then I'm going to take people to my website, or I'm going to do a whole email blast. If it's after you've created the works, you might want to think of similar things too. Like, okay, all the works are ready. Maybe it's time to email all of my collectors to go ahead and let them know I have these pieces available so that they can buy them. So it's all about just being proactive, really. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And just to piggyback for our audience, one of the best tips I got from another guest, Fine Art Services, is thinking about how you're going to move the art while you're making it. So he's an art handler, and he says, if you're going to make a 500-pound concrete sculpture on the 5th floor with no elevator, maybe you should reconsider, or like, add handles or make it so you can take it apart so you can get it like to the collector. What advice? So I have a confession to make. I never met like a serious art collector until I was 21 or 22. And to me, the idea of a collector was almost like a mythical thing, because I grew up I think a lot of people, I grew up in a rural, poor area. How would you meet a collector, and what would be like an organic way to start a conversation with them, and how would you identify a collector?
Well, I think, first of all, I think it's important to kind of demystify this idea of an art collector, because there's normal everyday people that will be willing to buy your art. And sometimes they don't have to be this like mega collector like the Rubels, which own a huge museum here in Miami, for them to buy your work. That's a very classic way of thinking of a collector. But a collector could be like you and me. Like, for example, I kind of consider myself an art collector because I love collecting posters. I love prints of different artists. And yeah, maybe I'm not buying the $1 million piece at Art Basel, but when I see an art piece and an artist that I really like, I go ahead and support them. So I think that kind of goes back to understanding what kind of people you would want buying your artwork. Because sometimes it's very easy to think like, oh, I want a huge collector to go ahead and buy my art and put it in this like private collection in their like private museum. But maybe the kind of art that you make doesn't necessarily fit that lifestyle. Let's say, for example, I love the work that is shown in Juxtapose magazine. That work is like super edgy, sometimes it's very illustration based. Sometimes, it's like revolves around like skate culture, and it's like not your usual contemporary art. And obviously somebody that's into the work that's in Juxtapose magazine is probably not going to buy artwork at Art Basel. So it's very important to think about that. For example, I had one artist that I had a phone call with, and I asked her that. I was like, oh, what kind of people would you want buying your work? And she was like, well, that's kind of a tough question. Why think about that? And I was like, okay, well, what kind of people you don't want buying your work? And then that's when she kind of started telling me, and she made somewhat sensual kind of art pieces. They weren't erotic, but they were sensual and had some kind of slightly sexual content. And I was like, okay, so who don't you want? And she's like, well, I wouldn't want it in like sex shops. I wouldn't want it in this. I wouldn't want these kind of people. And I'm like, okay, so now that you know who you don't want buying your work, who do you want buying your work? And she's like, well, I want women that are okay with their sexuality. I want couples that want something intimate in their bedrooms. I was like, and that's where you start looking for your collectors, people that are interested in those things.
That's so smart. What advice would you give to, what do you think is, if you're looking to sell your work, or if you're looking to become a full-time professional artist, what do you think is critical to avoid getting right, to avoid wasting time or money?
Ooh. It's critical to avoid wasting time and money. Well, first of all, don't invest in ads right off the bat. I know that it's something that's very enticing, and I know a lot of artists go ahead and try to jump into that because Instagram and Facebook and other social media platforms make it very easy. You know, if you start getting a lot of likes, they'll tell you boost your post right away, and you start thinking like, oh, I'm gonna get tons of sales. Don't do that. The reason why I tell you not to is because you have to be very strategic when it comes to investing in ads. Notice how I said investing. Because it's very easy to lose money if you just start boosting like every day, like, you know, $20-$30. You're like, oh man, I'm getting so many views and likes, but why haven't I made a sale? It's because there's like a method to that kind of madness. So unless you're really going to try to master how to do ads, which is a science of its own, at the beginning you want to go ahead and do things organically as much as possible. So that's the best way of not wasting money.
And how do you see the art market evolving over the next 10 years?
Ooh. Well, I think with everything that's going on now with this pandemic, the art world is being forced to go ahead and move into technology. I know that that has been a big issue over the last few years because, again, it's a very small group of people that control the art world. And we are told that the best way to experience art is in person, which I agree to some extent, but that doesn't mean that you can't buy work online or that you can't be engaged with it online in a certain way. So I think that over the next 10 years, galleries and other big players in the art world are going to have to innovate in some kind of way, and people are going to start getting more used to buying artwork online.
Where do you get your art news?
Oh, okay. ArtNet News, Artsy sometimes, Art Forum. Basically, the big art publications, the big contemporary art publications.
Do you have any artists that are really inspiring you right now?
Oh, always. Well, if you know me, the one artist I always talk about is Shepard Fairey. Like, that is my holy grail artist. Funny story, when I was working at a gallery in Wynwood many years ago, he actually came and he was doing like a signing of some sort. And I called out of my job at Apple to go ahead and see him. Like, that's how big, that's that one artist that always inspires me. The other one is, his name is Juan Cornella. And he does these like little illustrations and acrylic paintings that are extremely raunchy and very satirical, but there's like some truth to them. So there's one that I got during Scope Art Fair in December that it's this guy that he's like meditating. He looks like one of those like Indian gods with the multiple arms, but he's in a suit and he's like talking on the phone, he's on a laptop, he's basically multitasking, but he's catching on fire.
That's amazing.
So it's like, you know, I like a lot of artwork and a lot of artists that combine illustration and graphic design with fine art and have some interesting things to say about society, if that narrows everything down.
No, I mean, that actually, you know, like all art is political, but some art is open about it. Yeah, I think that's so good. And I love the fact that you called off work. I think one of the biggest turning points for me as an artist was treating artist lectures kind of like a concert. And so like one day I went and I took a train to another city to see an artist lecture, and it changed my whole life. You know, I completely get that. And that's so, you know, you care. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, no, I'll go really far to see art.
What do you think? Do you see, so like right now I'm really inspired by Damien Hirst going live on Instagram every day.
Mm-hmm.
I think that he's just like crushing it. Do you see anyone right now that's just like crushing it that you want to give a shout out to, or that you think we should look at for inspiration?
Well, I think you're doing great on Instagram. You are like busting these videos like every day, which kudos to you. So.
All right. If someone wants to go and become an art business mentor, how would like, what advice would you give to someone who wants to be where you are?
Well, I would start off with going ahead and, well, first you want to decide exactly where you want to take that. Know what you're comfortable teaching, because you want to teach only the things that you know. You don't want to go ahead and teach things that you've never had experience with. So for example, again, a big core of the things that I teach revolve around marketing and confidence building, because these are things that I've tested myself and I've tested on others, and I know that artists can succeed with them. So first thing, know what you're good at and know what you want to go ahead and teach artists. The second thing would be to go ahead and learn from others, perhaps investing in like a course or in a coach or somebody that can teach you how to do these things. So when I first started, I went ahead and got a course by Sam Ovens. Sam Ovens is like the king of consulting. Shout out to Sam Ovens. That's why I'm here. So, so basically finding somebody to kind of guide you through your journey. And then the third thing would be to go ahead and be open about what you're doing, be vulnerable, and give value. I think that's the most important thing, whether you are an artist or whether you're trying to be a coach or an art business mentor, is that you want to go ahead and give people as much value as possible so that they can get to know you and they can learn from you.
Should you work for free?
That's a debate I always have with my boyfriend. And I know exposure is a controversial topic among the art world. And I think you have to be very, very specific with who you work for free. Because I know sometimes there's a lot of different opportunities that come up where you can go ahead and work for exposure and they don't bring you anything. But there's other times that maybe it's for a company, or maybe it's for somebody that can get you closer to something that you want. So I think you have to be very selective. That's what I would say. So for example, when I was in art school, I did a lot of internships. I worked for free for years and nothing happened immediately. But years later, the gallery director became one of my close friends, and I was able to interview him and learn more about his story and use that as part of my content for my business. So it's like, be very selective. Or if you don't want to work for free, at least learn how to negotiate. And if they can't pay you, at least try to barter for some kind of service or some kind of thing that you would want from them in order to make the partnership balanced.
That's very good advice. What, if I'm an artist and I'm on the fence about buying or working with an art business mentor, how do I know if that's something that I should do, and how do I find the courage to make that leap?
Well, I think first of all, you have to know what you want. Like, have an idea of where you would want to take your career, because whether you work with someone like me or a different kind of art business mentor, you get results based on what you put into the work that you're given. So if you're not ready to commit your time to learning new things, if you're not sure about what you want to do, if there's like a lot of different variables going on in your life, sometimes it's better to kind of decide where you want to take your career and then going ahead and hiring somebody to help you take that leap to move forward.
Yeah. Is there anything that an artist could do to prepare themselves before they start?
Well, yeah, of course. So again, trying to think about what you would want to do. Second, you want to do your research. You want to know what they've done, and you want to feel connected to the person that you're going to work with. Because if your personalities clash, it's like, it's probably not going to work out. Do your research, and of course, get on the phone with them, talk to them, and see what they do, if their knowledge base aligns with where you would want to go, and then from there, make the decision. I think that no matter who you decide to work with, it's definitely something great, because it's always good to get that experience from somebody that knows more than you in certain topics.
And just to kind of wrap things up here, is there anything that you're excited about that you want to talk about, or anything that you want to ask the audience?
Well, I'm super excited to share in the description of this video, if you don't mind sharing it, this social media guide that I made for artists. And basically in that social media guide, you'll go ahead and learn the 4 main things that you need to do to get engagement on social media. And just talking about simple ways that you can go ahead and sell your work, because I know that Instagram, for example, and even other social media platforms are a great way of building relationships and connecting with other collectors. So when you learn how to use social media effectively, you can leverage the amount of people being attracted to you and connecting with you so that you can make more sales. So I hope that you guys find it helpful.
Yeah, that's going to be an amazing resource, and we're definitely going to link that in the description below. And where else can they find all of your content?
So you can follow me at Menji, menji.co on Instagram. On Facebook, I'm Stephanie Menji. And I have a private group called Artists Building Empires, where I go ahead and share monthly live videos on how to sell your work, how to promote your work, how to go ahead and build connections, and all kinds of different resources that are able to help artists make their careers better.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was such a great conversation.